Hey everybody, Ron Bielefeld, Whistling Wings Photography. Well, did you watch Canon's big announcement this morning? Pretty early this morning here in the United States, 6 a.m. I did. Are you gonna order? Have you already pre-ordered? Pre-ordering. Have you already pre-ordered an R5 Mark II or an R1 or both? Well, we're going to talk about the announcement, and we're going to talk about the R5 Mark II then, of course, and the R1, and from the perspective of a bird photographer, that's me, and probably a lot of you, wildlife photographers, bird photographers, and we'll see in the end how we feel about these two new cameras. Of course, I didn't get one. I didn't get either of these two cameras ahead of time. It would have been nice, but that's okay. We can use this video as kind of a forum for discussion on what we do know about these cameras now. Some new information, of course, versus all the speculation that we've been dealing with prior to the announcement. So I think we should talk about the Canon R5 Mark II first. From a bird photographer's perspective, it's a pretty interesting and somewhat exciting, I think, camera. At least to me, I'm pretty excited about it. Mainly because it's 45 megapixels, which, of course, the original R5 is also 45 megapixels, and I think that is a sweet spot. We've talked about this before. It's a very nice resolution for birds because we have to crop from time to time. Even though we try really hard to get close to these animals, these birds, it can be difficult even with really high, really long focal lengths. And so the 45 megapixel sensor, this is a brand new sensor. It's a backside illuminated stack sensor. So it's not going to be nearly the same, I don't think, as the old R5 sensor and its performance as far as the read speeds coming off of this sensor and, of course, noise generated, different ISO levels. So let's talk about this a little bit more as far as the read speed of this sensor versus the old one. Of course, the R5, the original, has rolling shutter effect in the background if you're panning fast with a bird and you've got vertical elements in the background and they're going to be slanted whichever way you are panning. Well, you know, that's not the greatest thing. We can't dictate backgrounds very rarely. We can try to find nice backgrounds and stuff, but dictating those types of things in the field can be very difficult, so we want to not have to worry about rolling shutter effect. Of course, there's going to be rolling shutter effect unless you, of course, you have a global shutter, which neither of these two new cameras that were just announced have. The R5 Mark II, I don't think we were, even considering a global shutter coming out in that camera. Here it is. It doesn't have one, but it has much faster read speeds. So Canon says it seems like 6.3 milliseconds. Well, is that fast enough so that you don't see the roller shutter effect in the backgrounds or in birds' wings moving very quickly through the frame, hummingbirds, when we're shooting electronic shutter, which is what I like to shoot because you get the fastest frames per second that way. And in the past, at least, you used to get, or you do get, or in the past, I don't know, how does it? In the past, hey, when you went to mechanical shutter, the viewfinder reaction is different. The way it looks, the way it behaves, it's harder to track really fast subjects. The electronic shutter on fast frames per second is always the smoothest. R5, R3, R7, it doesn't matter. That's the behavior. Now, what are we going to see in the R5 Mark II when it comes to this rolling shutter, the behavior of the viewfinder, and then switching to mechanical shutter? What are you going to see there as far as the behavior of the viewfinder? We're just going to have to wait and see. But the read speeds with electronic shutter, what I like to shoot the most for birds, we want to see No rolling shutter, please. They say it's reduced by like 40%. Well, is it enough? I guess we'll wait and see. Okay, got some notes here because definitely did not memorize everything I heard this morning when it, coming from Canon. So, the next main thing, us bird photographers, we bird photographers really are interested in most, autofocus performance. And the R5's autofocus, the original, was good. It was very good. But of course it had issues. They all have issues, it seems. One of the main issues was vertical elements in the frame. Man, it was like a magnet to the autofocus, and it would grab like little blades of grass or a little stick. You got the whole bird out there, and you're trying to focus on that, but it'll grab this little bitty vertical element, like a blade of grass or a stick or something like that. It was really frustrating. Get stuck on the foreground, stuck on the backgrounds. Very different behavior from what we were used to shooting digital SLRs. Are we going to see an improvement in that in the R5 Mark II? Well, the thing that the R5 Mark II didn't get, we'll talk about it with the R1, is the quad pixel autofocus, or what Canon called, I think this is the first time I've heard it called this, cross type autofocus. Now, back in digital SLR days, we had double cross type. And so you didn't have these sensitivities to vertical elements or horizontal elements. It was kind of all figured out in the end there. Then we moved to mirrorless and things changed again. The R5 Mark II did not get cross type or quad pixel autofocus. If it did, I'd be really excited for my bird photography and my wildlife photography in general, because I know it would be better in those scenarios that I just talked about, and it would probably be better overall getting stuck on background elements, foreground elements, and just sticking with your subject. Didn't get that. We'll just have to see how the autofocus performs. There's a lot of intelligent stuff built into the autofocus of the R5 Mark II, according to Canon, and so we'll have to see how that plays out. I think a lot of it is going to be face-oriented for people. I think with the R1, it's like ball-oriented. All this intelligent stuff about the autofocus predicting where to focus based on certain things that are happening in the frame. I don't think a lot of that is at all aimed at what a bird is doing or what an animal is doing. But we'll just have to wait and see. There's not a whole lot to go on here when it comes to the autofocus system, other than it's new and it's probably going to be better, faster, whatever. But lots of unknowns, I think. It's going to have to wait until we get these cameras, R5 Mark II in this case, in our hands to see what happens there. Let's see, 30 frames per second. That's another thing, frames per second. How fast is this camera? Well, it's faster than the R5. The R5 Mark II, 30 frames per second, electronic shutter, fastest mode, H+, R5, 20, R5 Mark II, 30. And unlike the R5 Mark II, you can dumb it down, you can slow it down from what I understand. You can go to 20 or 15 or 10 or 5, not just 30. Like the R5, you either get 20 or you got 1. Now with the R5 Mark II, we can have something in between there. That's awesome. Now let's talk about shooting fast and right? That's the R5, the original. You couldn't turn on a fake shutter noise. Is this a minimal issue? I'll tell you what, I've wanted one since that camera came out. I got my R3, it does it. The R7 does it. On down the line, they do it. The R5 never got that. Why? I like to hear what's happening, even if it's very quiet, which you can do. Please, R5 Mark II, have a fake shutter noise that we can turn on. Give us the option. I haven't heard anything about that. Canon didn't say anything about that in the announcement this morning, and I haven't read anything about it. So we'll see. It better have that, right? I mean, come on. It's more than just aesthetics. There's function to hearing what's happening when you're shooting. Sometimes there's noise around. Sometimes, hey, I got gloves on, my hands are really cold. I think I'm pressing the shutter button and I'm concentrating on my subject. I don't see the little frame flickering in there. I want to hear it. So hopefully that's coming. Please. Shouldn't be a really hard thing to do. Okay. So there you go. You know, R5 Mark II. Other things that are important to us as bird photographers. Pre-capture. They announced the R5 Mark II will have pre-capture, and it's going to be a lot better pre-capture than exists in other Canon mirrorless bodies. From what I understand, it's going to capture about, what, a half second or 15 frames or so of images as you half press. And then it's going to record those once you go to full press as individual images on your card. How about that? Much better than the old way of doing it, where you got this stacked thing and you got to put it into Canon's image processing software in order to unpack it and all. None of that. We've got something better now, which is nice, I guess. I mean, I kind of like to be able to get it myself, you know. But if you're making money at this and you can't afford to miss, then you're going to get the takeoff shots of the birds and stuff with pre-capture. I miss sometimes when without pre-capture. I'll try it for sure. Maybe I'll learn to love it. Skill, you got to have some skill. You got to, all this technology, where's the skill sets going? It's kind of what I'm going after here, but hey, we'll take it. A lot of people wanted it. It's here in the R5 Mark II. So you've got pre-capture. Oh, what else? A lot of stuff about video with the R5 Mark II. I'm not going to go into video here, except some cursory stuff because that's a whole nother video. A lot of stuff, though, seems to be going on the video side with the R5 Mark II. But you know what? The 5 series by Canon, when they brought the real hybrid camera onto the market, ever since then, that the 5 series cameras have been that hybrid camera series for Canon, and they're continuing that tradition here with the R5 Mark II by having a lot of video options with this. So you can't fault them for that. I like to take video. And here's something they brought up here. Simultaneous image capture and video capture. Now this has been out there before, but they're talking about simultaneous without interruption. So how's this going to work? This is something I can't wait to try, because there are definitely scenarios where I'm taking video and I want stills of the same action. I don't want to have to be switching back and forth. Switching back and forth is easy these days, of course, with these hybrid cameras, and that is awesome. But what if you could do both at the same time without interrupting either? And you're getting still images at the full resolution, you're getting the video at your settings that you set. Is that how this is going to work? Simultaneous stills and video capture without interruption is what Canon has stated for the R5 Mark II. I'll take that. We'll see how it works. Again, got to wait till we get these cameras in our hands so we can really try these things out. Oh, what else about the R5 Mark II? Cards. Bird photography related? Not really, I guess. Kind of. Because I don't shoot and duplicate my images on, dual recording onto 2 cards. I use my second card as a backup. As far as if I fill one card, my primary card, which will be the Compact Flash Express card in this case, since the R5 Mark II has a Compact Flash Express card slot, and it has an SD slot yet, still. 2 different slots. So, shooting really fast, card in the one slot, and then a slower card in the second slot. I use it as a rollover to where if I fill the first one, it rolls over to the second. But it affects things, buffering and all that, dumping the buffer and all that kind of stuff. So I really wish it would have had 2 fast slots, Compact Flash Express card slots, but it doesn't Heat, I guess, may be an issue with that. But they've got the cooling grip now and all that, and much better cooling inside in general, it seems, because it can do a whole lot more video, than the old R5 without any issues. So I don't know if heat was that big a deal. Anyway, still going to have to carry an SD card for the R5 Mark II. So be it. Not really it's not really a big deal for any kind of photography in particular. What else we got in here? I don't know. I think, as far as my overall impression of the R5 Mark II for bird photography is that it's going to be an improvement over the R5. I don't think there's any way you can get beyond that. And at a price point, we didn't talk about that yet. I was hoping $39.99 US dollars. $42.99 US dollars is what it turns out to be. Okay, fine. Less price is always better than more, but it didn't go way out there to $5,000 or something like that. So, well, it is once you get tax and all that, I guess. And then you get the grips. We haven't talked about the grips yet for the R5 Mark II. Some cameras like the R7 that I have sitting over there, no grips available for that camera. There's going to be 3 of them actually for the R5 Mark II. One is the normal battery grip where you get 2 batteries and you get redundant control, vertical controls too, and that's nice. You've a lot more battery life there. There's one that has Ethernet and some stuff built into it, which is nice. And then the cooling grip that we have been hearing about, if you've been paying attention at all, to help extend the shooting of video, 4K 60 for 2 hours or something now, something like that. It's like, okay, well, now we're getting, this is going beyond just the small short clips kind of shooting with these hybrid cameras. It's going into full-blown, video production and capabilities now with these improved performance characteristics for video. But we're not going to talk much more about that here. Well, the layout of the camera is actually a little different. The on and off switch is different. It's by the mode dial now, and there's a dedicated switch for going from videos to still mode. I liked it on the R5 when I could set the multifunction button, that little button up by the half press, or by the shutter button. I had that set as a toggle, and it's really fast and really easy to get to because your finger's right there for the shutter button. The R3, which I have right here, it has a dedicated stills and video switch. And thus, Canon doesn't let me program the multifunction button right up here by the shutter button to do that toggle. I hope they didn't take that away in the R5 Mark II because I like that option. Fine, have a dedicated switch, that's great. I'd rather have just that little button right there by the shutter button because, man, you can press that so quick. So there's a little bit of different setup of buttons and switches on the R5 Mark II over the R5, but I think overall it's very similar and should be really familiar. I'm pretty sure, it's not going to affect me too much as a bird photographer. Those changes that were made can easily adapt to that because there's still a big difference between the R5 setup and like the R3. So the R5 Mark II and the R1, there's going to still be that same difference in where the buttons and stuff are. So I'm just going to have to deal with it if you get the R1 along with the R5 Mark II. There's this thing that Canon mentioned in the announcement about upscaling of images in camera. Now, I thought quite a bit about this, and I'm really wondering how this works. Of course, it's not going to, like on the R5 Mark II, it's like upscaling to, what is it, like 190 some megapixels or something like that? Let me see, I'm going to find it in here. I can't find exactly what it is, but it's like really big. A lot more resolution. How's this going to work? It's obviously not going to create a second RAW file. It's going to be a JPEG or something. It's different, obviously, than moving the sensor around and creating in camera a much higher resolution picture image. So it's upscaling in camera, and it's supposed to have intelligent, neural stuff going on in there, along with noise reduction internal to the camera now that's much better than we've ever seen before. I'm wondering how this is going to work. Because if it really works well, that may be something to deal with the relatively low resolution of the R1, which we're going to talk about next, and then how that affects the R1 for bird photography. Because the R1 has this upscaling too. It's not like to 120 or 190 megapixels, but it's like 97 megapixels or something like that from 24. I mean, is there going to be in between? I mean, can you make it 50? Can you take a 24 and make it 50? Or do you have to go all the way to 97? On these cameras? I don't know. But this is interesting. We'll see how it works. I mean, the R5 Mark II now has eye-controlled autofocus. The eye-controlled autofocus of the R3. I never really liked it for birds. I don't know if any of you really use it for birds, if you had the R3, but it's there now. And, something that does affect us a lot. It's bird photographers, any kind of action photography, and birds in flight, wildlife running around, it's definitely action, is the performance of the viewfinder, which I kind of alluded to earlier. The viewfinder of the R5 Mark II is the same resolution as the original R5, but it's not the same viewfinder. Okay, it's the viewfinder from the R3, from all that I can tell from the announcement and what else I've been able to find. And I really like the R3's viewfinder. It is one of the best viewfinders I've had to my eye, out of Sony, Nikon, any of them. So if that viewfinder of this camera is now in the R5 Mark II, even though it's the same resolution as the old viewfinder and the old R5, it's going to be a lot better. And hopefully the behavior, like I talked about earlier, is better too, especially when you're using mechanical shutter, maybe slower frame rates in electronic shutter now that we can do that. Okay, so there's some definite things going on with the R5 Mark II that I think are going to make it a really, really good bird photography and overall wildlife photography camera. There's just no doubt about it. Is it going to drive my 600 f4 like my R3 does, the autofocus, the IS and stuff, to the capabilities and speeds that I want to see, given I'm used to shooting in R3? I don't know. I didn't hear anything about increased voltage, especially if you use the battery grip or something like that. But still, maybe it's improved with the overall improvements of the camera as technologies come along. Maybe we'll see the performance of the R3 with the R5 Mark II. On the 600 f4, it's going to be really cool to see how's it going to work on the 200 to 800 and stuff like that. Sure, the noise is going to be less with a backside illuminated stack sensor now. So these slower lenses like this 200 to 800, ISOs are getting better and better. 10,000 ISO on the R3, no problem. Can we see that? It's going to be fun to make these comparisons, these images, these different ISO settings between all these different cameras now. So I'm really excited about the R5 Mark II. Are you excited about the R5 Mark II? Let me know. Let's get a discussion going about this. So now let's move on to the R1. And the elephant in the room, we'll just deal with that right away. 24 megapixels, just like the R3. So many people are going to say this is just an R3 Mark II. I talked about this before. I think the R3 was supposed to be the R1 way back when, but, way back. 3 years ago or whenever this camera came out. They stuck with 24 megapixels. They explained it, kind of, not really, in the announcement that this is what professional sports and media and stuff, the quickness, fast, being fast. All about readout speeds and all about frames per second. So we got 24 megapixels in the R1. And can I not, I guess I have to say that I am disappointed in that because for birds, we've talked about this before, 24 is a little too little maybe. there's a lot more to the camera, of course, than just the megapixels. And there's more to just pixels than the number that you have, the resolution. It's the quality of those pixels as well. And we all know that. So there's a lot of unknowns with the R1, just like there still are with the R5 Mark II. And so let's not just go crazy just because it's still 24 megapixels. Let's wait until we get this camera in our hands, those of us that will get it, or rent it when it comes out or whatever. Hopefully these things come out pretty quickly, right? Hopefully we're not waiting months and years and stuff for these things. It's been an issue in the past. You know, availability of these things after announcement, Canon says that it's going to be better this time. So let's wait until we get these things in our hands and we'll see what we get with the R1. You know, 40 frames per second, R1 shooting RAW. All right, that's pretty fast. I think that's the fastest out there, comparing it to the Z9. And I'm not doing comparisons to Sony and Nikon. That's not what this is about. It's about whether this is going to be a good camera for bird photography in general, but it's fast, 40 frames per second, raw shooting, a big buffer. You're going to sit there and shoot, I think, with a fast compact flash express card in there, dumping the buffer really fast. I think it's going to be unbelievable for that, because that's what this camera is designed to be, is fast all the way around. And so, the R1, we talked about it a little bit. It's going to have the cross-type autofocus, and that after resolution, we talk about autofocus. And for birds and wildlife and action bird and wildlife photography, we're in some pretty demanding scenarios, shooting a lot. And this cross-type autofocus could be a huge change. And if it is, that may outweigh, the 24 megapixels in a lot of shooting scenarios, because you're going to get the shot. Now, in the announcement for the R1, they showed all this anticipatory autofocus behavior where the ball, the soccer player's kicking the ball, and it's falling, and it anticipates where the ball is going, and it automatically focuses on the player down the field that's going to receive the ball. Well, that's pretty interesting. And I didn't see any birds. I didn't see any reference to birds. What was it? Soccer, basketball, volleyball. It seems ball-centric, right? Something is moving in a direction, distance, coming closer, whatever, and it's using that as an anticipatory thing to focus on the next player. How's that going to work for birds and wildlife and stuff? I don't know. I don't know if there's even going to be an application. There was no bird in that list, no animals in that list, no bird photography, animal photography as an activity in that list there. So I'm not sure. But until we get these things, like I said, and try them out, there may be applications in there that we just don't know of now. So that, the autofocus changing to cross type, all this intelligence built into these things now, it may be unbelievable. It may be unbelievably good. So we'll have to see. It has a lot of the same stuff, as the R5 Mark II. It's got the stills and video simultaneously. We have to see how that goes. It's got the two compact flash express card slots. Yes, thank you. The viewfinder on this camera, it went from 5.7 to 9.44 million dots. So that's a big increase. And it's got the eye-controlled autofocus, but it's the eye-controlled autofocus Mark II. Is that going to make it better for birds and wildlife than the original version of that? I don't know. It's going to have to wait and see. I'm going to try it. I'm sure those of you who get the R1 are going to try it, and we'll see how it works. But it's something new. The viewfinder being so much more resolution. Like I said, I like the R3, the viewfinder. It's amazing. I wonder what this one's going to be like. The R1, looking through the R1, is it going to be like almost like an optical viewfinder? Like, we used to be looking through our lenses now. I mean, are we getting to a point now where you just don't even think about it? I don't really think about it now. Shooting the R3, the R1 might be just unbelievably amazing. Can't wait to try it. Readout speeds, some of the fastest out there, and 40% faster than the R3. I didn't see much rolling shutter effect in the R3, if any. So the R1 is going to be imperceptible in any scenario. Shooting hummingbirds, wings are going to be fine in electronic shutter. I can shoot that now, and it's not going to be an issue. Is that right? We'll see. It's like a lot of this stuff. But it's a big improvement. It's a big improvement. Again, the upscaling thing. That's really comes into play potentially for 24 megapixel images if you need that resolution. But how's this thing going to work? To be honest, I don't really have much hope for it, to being a solution for 24 megapixels, but I go to 96 in camera and it was like I shot it at 96. I don't know. There's got to be some give and take there. I don't know what data you're going to lose or gain, or if it's going to be accurate and things are going to look sharp or not. I have no idea. What do you think? What do you think this is going to do? Is it going to be at all applicable to bird photography, wildlife photography? Lot to find out when these cameras get in photographers' hands. People that are out there really using these things, and putting them through their paces in really tough shooting scenarios. It's going to be interesting. They did mention wildlife when they were talking about the R1. It's obviously it's a sports-centric camera, but they did mention wildlife, and why not? I mean, just because you can make a product that is tailored to something. I mean, the R1 being tailored to sports, the R5 Mark II being tailored to wildlife. I don't know, but that doesn't mean obviously that you can't use the R1 for wildlife and the R5 Mark II for sports. I mean, of course, so we'll just have to see how this all plays out. But we've got 2 new cameras from Canon. And like I've said before, I mean, even with the older cameras, if you can't get good images now, I mean, with anything that's really out there that's relatively new, I mean, there's a lot of capable tools out there right now, and that's what these things are. They're tools. Pick the best tool for what you do the most or whatever. Get all the tools if you can afford them, so you have the right one for the right job. And boy, we're sitting here with what I consider just, we're talking about all this all this intelligent autofocus and stuff now. It wasn't too long ago, when I was shooting my 1DX Mark II, when I had one single autofocus point in the center of the frame, and it was my job to keep that little autofocus point on my bird in order to get sharp images. And even back then, even if you did keep it on the bird and it's servoing, you didn't get all sharp shots. I'll tell you what, nowadays with these autofocus systems, we cannot be complaining. The 24 megapixels now is like probably 50 used to be because of the image quality, the quality of those pixels, to reduce noise and all that kind of stuff. So, there's no real substitute for good, clean resolution. And I'm not talking about just for cropping. Get all 50 megapixels, 45 megapixels, whatever you have on your subject, and you can render some unbelievable detail. And that's sometimes where this 24 megapixel thing just kind of is a bummer, but it is what it is. And so now we're gonna try these cameras, including the R1, and we'll see what they look like and what kind of detail and image quality they can bring to us. So I'm excited overall. I'm number 1 on the list at a certain place at Service Photo up in Baltimore. Thank you, Burke, for doing that, and your team for keeping me at the top of the list for both the R5 Mark II and the R1. And I do not hesitate to recommend Burke and his team up at Service Photo in Baltimore, Maryland for any of your camera needs. They are an awesome group of people. They've treated me great for so many years. So hey, if you're looking for someone to help you out, give them a call. Anyway, I think we're about done here. Did I forget anything that's important to bird photographers that I didn't cover? Well, okay, $42.99 for the R5 Mark II, $62.99 for the R1. Hey, that's about what, that's fine. Some people were talking $9,000, $10,000. You knew that wasn't going to happen because the Nikon equivalents and the Sony equivalents of the flagships aren't that high. So, $62.99, that's about right, I think, for all this technology. What else? I think that's it. Hey, leave your comments down below. Let's get a discussion about all this stuff going on, and we'll keep that going as these cameras start getting in our hands. And I'll be coming back with videos on the R5 Mark II, on the R1, bird photography centric stuff. And we can try to build an understanding of these cameras together and how to best use them as awesome tools for creating unbelievable images. So hey, until next time, I hope you have great light. I hope you're getting great images. Be safe out there. I'll see you soon.